Hi, Ashmita. Very warm welcome. So, welcome to C Foundations with data structures, algorithms, and the overall objective is to get you, let's say, project ready and interview ready, where you can implement the capstone at least with C programming, C Foundations, and using the data structures. So, this guide is a collection of 36 sessions, which we are going to execute in sequence. Okay. And topic wise, I have organized what are we going to study on what respective date. And this is how we will move forward. In case if we have to optimize anywhere, I'll look into it and I'll do that. Okay. So initially, we are going to get started with the foundations of C programming. Okay. Many once you are done with foundations like what are the syntax of C programming and how what kind of functions we are going to create, understanding all variables, different data structures which are available in here. So we are going to do all of that in the foundations. Okay, followed by we will set up our logic, how we can use these foundations to implement our logic in order to get some tasks done, in order to get some actions done. Okay, that is what we are going to do. Then we'll understand existing functions which are available in C programming, how we can make the best use of those functions, okay, in order to fast track our code. So we'll understand different functions which are available. We'll understand collections. So collections will give you a deeper understanding into different types of data structures which are available. So we'll understand collections. Then we'll move forward towards how this programming language, interprets or interrupts the memory, modifies the memory, utilizes the memory in order to get things done, which means how it works on RAM. So we'll use a debugger, and with that debugger, we'll try to understand, we'll debug the programs, and we'll see what it really does on memory. Okay, suppose you have written a high-level program in C, then you convert it into an object code. That object code is running on RAM. We'll use a debugger to see what he is doing. Okay, so that will give you
Okay.
much control on a program, and so that is going to give you a lot of understanding about how things are working on the actual operating system. Okay, then we'll move towards data structures. We'll get to the basics of data structures, how we use different types of data structures to solve different kind of problems. What are the different data structures which are important with interview readiness? We will focus on those data structures also, okay, which are generally asked in interviews with Google and various other organizations like FANG. So we'll see what are those important data structures which are very, very important. So we are going to do a little more practice on it so that you have a better understanding of them. We'll understand different kind of algorithms which are there. And finally, we'll try to have a capstone kind of a project using everything, whatever we have learned so far. Okay. Because learning is a different thing. What you have to build here in this course is experience, and how that experience will be, exchanged. You will be able to gain that experience when you will implement it in form of a project. Okay. So the overall objective is to give you that experience, how C works, how data structures work, how we can make the best use of it in order to solve real world problems. Okay. And how will you use it for your further career in, let's say, VLSI, or however you want to proceed further in your career. Okay. So, so we will be taking some, capstone context also in order to get some things done. Here there is a project mentioned, but I will decide what project we have to do typically. Okay, on the basis of however we'll go in the program. On the basis of that, I'll decide a project. Okay. So for now, it is written as inventory and employee records in C, but I'm sure I'm going to change this project as soon as we progress further. I would like to make it more relevant with respect to your future interview, which you can mention something on your resume. Okay, that would be better. So
Okay.
we'll work on something which would be important. Okay. Now, so we'll be doing we'll have a capstone project. Okay. Then the overall objective which you can expect out of this program is you will be able to write code well. Okay, you will be able to dry run those programs, debug those programs, test those programs, analyze the complexity of those programs, and you can explain C based solutions okay, in an interview ready way. So this is what is the objective which we are planning that you should be able to get out of the program. This is the outcome which we are expecting. Okay. Now, then we have a 36 session roadmap, which is the baseline which we will follow for the upcoming sessions. Okay. We're going to get started with program environment and how C runs. Okay. This would be our focus on the respective day. So today we will get started with this, maybe today and in the next session. And then session by session, we'll move with the respective topics. Okay. So first we have the foundation phase. We'll get started with the foundation phase. These are number of sessions and the topic which we are going to cover in sequence. Okay. So session 1, session 2, session 3, session 4, we'll try to follow this roadmap. Sometimes we may be able to cover multiple topics. Sometimes we may need a couple of sessions for the same topic. So we'll adjust however is needed. Okay. But this is an overall roadmap so that we both are clear about how we are going to move forward. Okay. Now, so then we'll go with variables, data types, constants, casting, all of this we'll understand. How we do input and output with C program, how do we do safe text entry, we'll do that understanding. Then we'll move towards operators, expressions, precedents, bitwise operators, basics, we'll do implement that. Then we'll get into decision making with if else, nested rules, okay? We'll get into switch case, ternary decisions, menu designs, we'll understand loops for while, do while, break, continue. Then we'll move to nested loops. Then we'll get into pattern thinking, how we do dry runs. You'll get exposure to functions, prototypes, parameters, return values. Okay, this is what you're going to learn by 9th session. So typically, let's say by 3 weeks, we will be completing foundations typically. Okay, by 10, 11 sessions, we'll complete the foundations part. So we'll understand scope, what is local scope, what is global scope, how do we access those variables, how do we write modular codes, how different languages are built over C that we will do. We will see some examples of how Python was built over C, how C++ was built over C. Okay, we'll get to that kind of understanding. Then you have an understanding of recursion and the call stack, how that is working. So by 11th session, we'll try to complete our foundations. Okay, one by one. We'll go practical. So the session is organized into 2 parts, a theoretical part to have an explanation of the concept, then the practical implementation of that respective part. Okay, so this is going to be hands-on. Every day we are going to discuss it conceptually. Let's say 25-30% would be the concept and 70% would be the code part. Practically implement that and move forward. Okay, that is what we are going to follow. Then we'll start with collections and memory, typically by let's say 4th week, by end of the 4th week. Okay, so one-dimensional arrays, contiguous storage. We will understand how collections work, how memory work. Then we'll get into array search, insert, delete, or how 2-dimensional arrays work, how matrices work. Okay, how we use strings, how we use character arrays. So you're going to have an understanding on this. Then we'll move towards string interview problems. We'll understand palindrome, what are anagrams. So collections and memory, we will be focusing. Okay, we'll have an understanding of pointers, what are addresses, what are dereference pointers, how do we ensure safety of pointers. Okay, these are very important concepts with respect to interviews and implementation as well. So when you will be writing code for, let's say, an embedded system, all of this would be used. Okay. Then we'll get to call by reference, call by value, call by reference, how those concepts are, implemented in C. Pointer parameters, pointer arithmetic, we'll do all of that. Then we'll get into dynamic memories, how malloc, calloc, reallocate, and free, how these functions work. These are very, very important concepts in C programming. Okay. Then we'll understand how structures work, how procedural data modeling is done in C programming. How do we do file handling? How do we handle errors? How do we debug programs? How do we do defensive programming? This is also important. Okay, how do we write code so that nobody can hack into it? And how hackers can exploit our code. So suppose I'm writing a function and hacker can, do a memory, injection or bypass the memory and get into the private fields and, modify the variables, bypass the login access of my program. So how we are going to protect against such issues? Okay. How hackers can exploit our code. Suppose you have written a program, you have integrated into an embedded, device, and a hacker identified that exploit and he hacked that machine. So we have to protect with such. situations. So how do we write defensive programming? What all C libraries we use? So we are going to cover that as well. Then we'll get into DSA and algorithms. Okay, data structures algorithms. So we'll understand stack, last in, first out. We'll understand queues, first in, first out, circular buffer. All of these algorithms we will be implementing. We'll discuss single linked list, hash tables, trees and binary search trees, heap and priority based retrievals, graphs, BFS, DFS, representations. All of this we will learn. Try, these are very, very important data structures with respect to competitive programming. How tries are used, how do we do prefix search, okay? Then searching, sorting, complexity analysis, two pointers, sliding windows, recursion patterns, backtracking, all of this is competitive programming. DSA and algorithms fall under competitive programming. So this will help you crack the placements, internship selections, as well as placements. So this part, DSA and algorithms will help you crack it. Okay, and finally, we'll try to put everything into one capstone. So all of these examples we would be taking in context of a project. So we'll take a project and we'll implement all of these concepts along with that project. So we have a deeper experience about using everything. Okay, so this is the roadmap of next 36 sessions, which we are going to move. Okay, in this direction, we will be moving. So the objective is very simple. How do we do? So first, we are going to have an explanation of the topic. I'm going to do a dry run of the topic, which means I will be coding along with you. I will do a dry run of that particular concept, how that works. I will use Visual Go in order to visualize initially how things are working so that you can, you can get help with visualizations about how these data structures are working. There is one website, visualgo.net, which we will be using. This is a good website which we will be using during the program, visualgo.net. Okay. So suppose I have to, suppose I have to explain you binary heap, for example. So this is just a random example which I'm taking. So we use this for visualization about how things are happening, what all concepts are there. So we might not be covering each and everything here. This you can read, okay? But we will be using it with respect to our, the curriculum, whatever we have to address. So let's say if I have to insert, let's say 55 into this. So how the program works, how it will, go to a respective pointer. So you're going to have that understanding appropriately. Okay. Those visualizations, how that algorithm is working, will be doing that. So I'll try to have a dry run. Then we're going to write the code respective so that you have an understanding. Wherever test is required, we'll do a little test. We'll measure what was required. Okay, so this is going to be the idea behind how we are going to move forward in every session. And so for now, this is a base weightage about what all would be covered. So we will be covering syntax foundations. We'll be building logics. Then you will have an understanding of data structures. You'll have understanding of algorithms. You'll have an understanding of debugging. You'll be able to read codes and interpret those codes and write your own codes. And finally, a working project, a capstone kind of a project. So as to have a better understanding. So that is how the curriculum is organized. Okay. And as you're aware, everything cannot be covered. The more you study, the more time you devote, the more, learning experience you will have. So that is how we have to. We all are students for life, and it takes years to, have a clear understanding of what is being done. And majority of the times, the actual learning happens when we implement a project or when we solve a problem. So whenever somebody will give you a project to do, and then you will be solving those problems, then your actual learning will happen. Okay. So we'll be taking care of foundations first, how everything is being done with some samples, and then you have to implement it. Okay. So the more you implement, the more knowledge you will gain. Okay. So this is what we will be doing. So now we would be starting typically with this. We need to have a programming environment, and then we have to have a clear understanding of how C programming runs. This is what we have to do. Okay. So what do we need here is, first we need to have a source where we can write C source code. Okay. And then we should be able to compile that code with a compiler. Okay. The compiler which we will be using will be GCC. Okay, we'll be using GCC compiler. So what we can do, let us quickly get started with, the tool which you have to install. The tool is MySys32. Okay. Here's the link, mysys2.org, and I'm sharing the link with you on Zoom chat. So you can download this quickly. When you go down to here, you'll find the installer. What MySys2 is, it is a software distribution and building platform for Windows, which means it is a collection of tools and libraries which will provide you with easy to use environment for building, installing, and running Windows native software. Okay. So basically it provides us compilers and all of that with which we can build compiler code, convert those codes into executables and run on Windows operating system. Okay. So MySys32, MySys2 we are using. We can use code blocks also. It is a software. We can use Visual Code also. So, but I would prefer initially this one so that you have a console-based understanding of how program is written. So that when you go to a corporate environment and when you get introduced with Linux, because majorly in your corporate experience, you'll be interacting somewhere, maybe Linux or maybe Mac. Okay. So eventually there would be Unix based consoles. So you should be able to write console based codes and fix them. And in fact, in embedded programming specifically, you will get Linux based consoles. So you must have a little more confidence. So this MySys2 will give us a console kind of environment on Windows. It will give us a Linux console kind of an environment for Windows. Okay. So now what you have to do, here is the exe file, MySys2 x86. You can click here and download it. I've already downloaded it. So I'll show you how that runs. So this is the dry run, MySys2. So when we msys2, okay. So on my machine, it is installed, if you see here, and it shows msys2 ucrt64. This is the application which we will be using to compile our codes, okay, using GCC. So when I click on this, I get a shell like this, somewhat like this. So this gives me a Linux-based UI. So once your msys2 is installed, you're going to get an interface somewhat like this, okay? And we have to use GCC on this. So we are going to install GCC also. So we will be using GCC here. Okay. So the GCC version which I am using currently is 16.1.0. This we will be using. Okay. Now, so once you click here, you're going to get a download. So let's say when I click on download, I get a download somewhat like this, MySys32x8664.exe. You click on it, double click on it, get started with the installation. When you install, you're going to get somewhat like this. You can select the path as C, MSys64, whatever the default path is. You can go next, 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 install. And finally, you're going to get an installation window somewhat like this. Once your MSys2 is installed, you're going to get a UCRT64 environment in form of a terminal. And this we will be using. And once you are done with this, then we will be executing this pacman-s mingw x64 ucrt to install the GCC compiler. This is the command which we shall run in order to install GCC command, the compiler. Okay. So जब हम डालेंगे ये पूछेगा do you want to install, we'll say yes. Okay, it will give us and a prompt somewhat like this, proceed with installation, yes. जब हम yes कर देंगे तो finally we will get GCC version, the version which we installed. Okay, so this will help us get the GCC setup done. Okay, so this is how we are going to get the environment to get started with this particular session. Okay. Okay. Sir, I actually have downloaded